Hey everyone, this is Tracy Friedlander. You're listening to Crushing Classical, redefining a thriving classical music career. Today on the show, I have my friend Kate Kayaian. Kate is a cellist who is redefining what a career as a soloist looks like. She is a completely self-started soloist, and she now has a career unique to her, traveling to perform solo engagements as well as playing concerts and teaching in both Boston and her second home in Bermuda. She also has a blog sharing about all of this and more called Tales from the Lane. In our talk today, we break down what it looks like to jumpstart your own solo career. Kate shows you that you really can do it yourself. It just takes one step at a time. And she goes into those steps in detail. She has some great advice about this, as well as how to stay organized when you begin booking up your calendar. The organization piece is super valuable for anyone, whether you're booking your own engagements or just managing your life. This is a great episode for you if you're missing the solo or chamber music part of your life and you are wishing for more. Kate's advice? Just do it. Find out how she did it today on the show. Also, a big thanks to Gabby Castro of the clarinet quartet 4Play Clarinet. Gabby composed the new Crushing Classical theme music that you heard at the beginning of this episode. You can find out more about Gabby and what she does on Facebook and Instagram at 4Play Clarinet, Fourplay Clarinet. Her handles are listed in the show notes. Before we start, I'd like to thank Fix Music for sponsoring Crushing Classical Podcast. Fix Music is your online resource for high-quality sheet music at great prices. There are some new offerings at Fix available that you'll want to know about. Now there's organ music, a large choral music selection, as well as orchestra parts that you would need for concerts and auditions. And now they are actively working with choral and orchestra directors to help plan seasons. So if you're a program director and you want some help on choosing pieces for your next season, contact Fix Music today through their website. And as always, free shipping on all domestic orders. Check out fixmusic.com for your sheet music needs and use the link in the show notes to receive 10% off your first order. Let's get started. Hey, Kate.
Hey, Tracy.
So glad you're here. Thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Tell us about your career, because you really have made an intentional career as a soloist, but not like I think it's different because you're concertizing with recitals and chamber music, right?
Right, mostly, yeah.
Yeah, so, and you just decided that's what you wanted to do. So I want to know how does one just do that? I mean, you know.
Well, it was definitely a big switch. I kind of made a big pivot from your standard freelancing career. I was living in Boston and playing with, the great ensembles there and teaching. And I worked at a private school, middle and high schools, doing some stuff there. And I remember when one of my colleagues at the school was talking about my future retirement party, because retiring from that school was a really big deal. And I just felt like every cell in my body just kind of seize up, like, wait, no, that's wrong. I'm not supposed to retire from doing this. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
And I went home and thought long and hard. I was like, well, if I'm not supposed to be doing that, then A, why am I doing it? And B, what am I supposed to be doing?
Right.
And so I had been doing randomly just a couple of solo recitals, like one piece on this recital and one piece on this concert, and traveling a bit for them. And I loved it. I loved the travel. I loved connecting with people. I loved being on stage. I loved not wearing concert black all the time.
Right.
And yeah, I just sort of decided that this was the time to do it. I was about to get married. My fiance lived in Bermuda, and I was going to be leaving town. And I figure, well, this is a good way to make a split and make this pivot, because I can sort of say I'm leaving to go live in Bermuda and live with my husband, and it was an opportunity to recreate myself.
Right. So it was kind of perfect that right when you would be, because moving towns is like a good time just to change things up. obviously, because then you don't have to
Absolutely.
explain to people, guess what? I don't want to freelance anymore. Like,
Yeah, I
what?
mean, I think that we all have this fear that, if you try to bust out of the freelance ranks, if you will, I mean, I think that's the fear that that's what it looks like we're trying to do.
Yeah,
That people will look at you funny and say, well, who do you think you are? If you were going to have a solo career, you would have had it when you were in conservatory. They would have whisked you off. Um,
right. And
and
it's supposed to look like that. It's supposed to look like you have representation and you're flying to play with major orchestras. And if you don't do that, then you can't. Like, that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because
Yeah. Well,
because
I think
I
it was like that for a long time. I think that was the standard route. You'd go
yeah.
to conservatory, you'd be discovered, you'd win a major competition, you'd be signed, and they'd launch your career. There you go.
And it's
Um,
either that or you're going to pursue a job in an orchestra. And then the
mhm.
third option, which is freelancing, is like, at least I always viewed it as that's what you do when you haven't gotten a job yet. Like, no one really intentionally becomes a freelancer. They do it when they haven't gotten a job yet. At least that's what it looked like around where I was.
Yeah, for
So,
a lot of people. For a lot of
yeah,
people. A lot of people just sort of decide, they'd rather freelance in a major city than have an
right.
orchestra job in a smaller town.
Right.
It's some people go for the job, some people go for the environment, I think. But
Yeah.
for me, yeah, it just, in hindsight, I think that was all ridiculous. I don't think anybody really would have cared
Right.
what I was doing. We always think that people think so much about what we're doing, and really they're too busy worrying about themselves. Um,
Exactly.
and if anything, people, and I still play the occasional freelance concert. I mean, those are my friends, and they're so busy that's the only time we get to see each other.
Right.
Um, uh, but people will come up to me and send me random emails and just say, "Oh, I got your newsletter, and it's so inspiring." And I actually wanted to let you know I'm putting together a recital program to do myself, and you really inspired me to do that. And so I think that's great. And so yeah, I didn't need to be concerned about any of that at all, but it did help me psychologically at the time to say, okay, here I am doing it this way now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just, I sat here in Bermuda and I said, actually, even before I left, when I sort of knew I was going to make the break, I thought, okay, well, what do I need to have that kind of career, to play concert? Basically, it wasn't even a career. It was like, I just want to play more concerts.
Mm-hmm.
And what do I need to do that? And I said, okay, well, I need to have some repertoire that I can play that's already prepared. And I need to have a way for presenters to hear me. And then I need a website. And while I was still at the school, I applied for a faculty grant to record a CD.
Mm-hmm.
And my pianist and dear friend, Steve Porter, and I put together a program of all French music. It was insane. It was, Poulenc cello sonata. Truly, who did I think I was? But, and I just would get to the school at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning and do my practicing then. It was the only time I had. But I made the CD. And a friend of mine was starting to help me build a website that he got busy. And I just figured, well, can't be that hard, right? Got to be able to figure it out. I've got time. I don't have a deadline. So every day I just sat there, and it was so frustrating at times. But I figured each step out and looked on YouTube and Googled what I didn't know, and built it. And before I knew it, I had a CD. I had some concerts that I could put down on a schedule, and I had my website, and I just started emailing presenters.
Okay, yeah, that was my next question. How did you find out who presenters were?
Google.
Okay.
Google is your best friend. I mean, there were some recital series, like there's a library outside of Boston that I think they have concerts every single Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
and they're free. They don't pay. But I knew it was a good way to get out there and practice performing. You forget, when you're at college and in conservatory and grad school, you're performing all of the time, and you just get so used to it. And when you get out of that habit, you need to give yourself time to get back into the habit.
Mm-hmm.
You learn so much from every performance. So I wanted opportunities to perform, and I wanted just to have things on my concert schedule on my website. Because I knew that if I emailed a presenter and said, "Oh, your series looks great. I think my program would be a good fit for you. Here's my website. Here's my information. Here's some audio clips." If they look at your stuff and you haven't played a concert in 2 years, they're not going to be the first ones to hire you.
You mean the ones that pay?
The ones that pay,
right?
Yeah, of course.
So you started with playing recitals that necessarily didn't pay.
A couple of them,
okay.
Yeah, and a couple of series that I had played before. I mean, I had never completely stopped performing solo stuff, so I had those presenters that we would go back and play there. And it doesn't, the presenters who pay don't look at your website. They don't necessarily know that, that concert doesn't pay. She did it for free.
That's
They
true.
don't know that.
That's true.
They just see that you're out there and you're doing it. And so that's how it started. Then it just started snowballing.
That's great. So do you have people contacting you?
I do, yeah, which is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
The first time I got that email, I was like, wait, this is supposed to work the other way around. Sure.
That's great.
Yeah. And, even when I'm emailing the presenters, the first time I got a yes, I just stared at my email screen. I was like, wait, really? Really? You said yes? And it was a great feeling. And really, it's just a numbers game. When you're starting out, a certain percentage of people aren't even going to reply to you.
Mm-hmm.
Some will reply and say, "You sound great, we're interested, but we're booked for the season," or "the scheduling doesn't work out." And a certain percentage will write back and say yes. And
right.
have to figure out, if I get 4 yeses out of every 10 emails and I want 50 concerts, you just do the math and send out that many emails.
I love how proactive this is, because I think a lot of people, myself included, like I admit, back in the day when I'd see, there's a symphony here that I played as a regular extra, but their chamber music series only included the regular members, and I remember going like, oh, that sucks, why can't, and eventually I just decided to put my own chamber music concert on, and I did it. Yeah. And it was the same kind of thing. You're like, oh, wait, what was I waiting for? All I had to do was call a church, and they were happy to. And they even put out an ad in the paper, and people showed up. And, we got paid because we didn't get paid by the church, but we had a suggested donation box, and everyone got a little bit of money. And, if you keep doing that over and over, eventually, like you said, it's a numbers game. Eventually, you'll start to get paid. And plus, how great is it that you've been doing, you probably have a list of repertoire that's prepared. Certainly, you probably have to brush things up. But isn't it nice to be able to play things more than one time?
Oh, my gosh. It's a game changer.
Yeah.
It's a total game changer. You really, obviously, you get more and more comfortable performing it, but you get to know the pieces better. Yeah, you get to know the pieces so much better. When I perform something for the 10th time, I almost think, who was I to play it the first time? I didn't know it. Well, and that's not true. It's just, I guess it's like being married. Like, obviously, you feel like you know your spouse really well when you get married, the day you get married. But years later, you're like, I didn't know anything about you.
Exactly. Well, that's so interesting, too, because it's like most of the time you do prepare something, especially when you think back to college, like you're preparing for a senior recital or something, and you practice that music for maybe a year, and then you play it once and then you're done. And maybe in the future you'll play it again, but it's all that prep for just one concert. So
yeah, I will say one thing that I always did that in hindsight, I'm really glad I did it. But even when I was freelancing and I really didn't feel like I needed to practice Beethoven Fifth for, the 100th time I was playing it with an orchestra, I would put sonata repertoire and concerto repertoire and solo Bach, I would put it kind of into a rotation. And I would practice, the first month the first week of the month, I would practice one Beethoven sonata. And then the second week, I would practice a different Beethoven sonata. And I would just go through all the Beethoven sonatas. And then I would go through all the Bach suites and practice them for a week. Not totally in depth, but just kind of keeping everything sort of in my fingers. So it, now when I'm booking programs, it hasn't been 10 years since I've played a piece.
Right.
And obviously I'm working on it more in depth now, but it's been a really fun process.
That's so great. So how do you keep all this together? Do you have a management?
No, I don't. I do it all myself, which is great in a lot of ways. Obviously, I don't have to pay anybody any fees.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the best thing that I like about it is I really get to know the presenters. I'm the one forming the
Yeah.
relationship with them. Uh, and I really like that. By the time I show up into the city and meet them, it's like we're old friends, um, and that's been really nice. It is becoming really time consuming, and I'm
Yeah.
conscious of the fact that that time I could be spent doing other things that I don't have to be the one booking concerts. I do have to be the one practicing for the concerts.
Yeah.
And I don't have to book my travel arrangements, but I do have to be the one teaching my students. Uh, and so I'm kind of toying with the idea. I'm thinking about maybe if there's like an in between kind of situation.
Like a
So
virtual assistant or something like that.
yeah, something
Yeah.
between a virtual assistant and a manager, but we'll see. I mean, I might end up just handing it off and going with management. And if they can get me bigger concerts and bigger fees, it's worth it,
Right.
obviously.
Exactly. That's true.
But yeah.
So tell, like, I know because we're friends and I know about your organizing skills. So I want
Uh,
to I want to dive into that because it's something I struggle with. I think a lot of people struggle with it. And you seem to have this really great system. So tell me how you keep track of all your concerts, your teaching, your your travel. You're in a lot of places. Like, how do you not get totally frazzled?
uh, okay, two things. I have multiple calendar situations,
Okay.
and everything is color coded.
Okay. Do you use a Google Calendar too?
I use my iCal on my Mac just for when I'm at my computer and get an email, and it's easiest to just toss the date and time in there.
Right.
And then I use that to transfer things into. I have a paper planner that I use. It's by a company called Ink and Volt,
Yes.
which is awesome. I found it as a Kickstarter randomly. I don't know. It was probably like an Instagram ad or something, and it looked interesting, and I clicked on it, and I said, "Oh, finally, this is a planner that works for my musician's life."
Mm.
So I think people who are looking at planners look at as many as you can because they're all a little bit different, and you have to figure out what you need and do it that way. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, I have my teaching is in one color. My anything cello related, so practicing, rehearsals, concerts is in a different color. I do a lot of work with the Boston Youth Symphony Orchestra. That's in a different color. Um, what else? On my blog, I write a blog, so anything to have to do with that is in a different color. And it's just, yeah, my social life is in a different color. It's also easy to kind of keep it in balance because if I look at a week and let's say, I think my social engagements are like light blue. If I don't see any light blue in that week, I need to make some lunch dates or go for some walks with some friends and
Right.
schedule something in there. So
That makes sense. So
keep it
do you keep the
going.
color coding consistent across like your iCal and everything else?
A little bit. They don't totally match up, but for my iCal, I have things like work, teaching, and performances, I think, and
Okay. I
household life things.
Yes, I like the color coding idea. That's great. I
Hmm.
actually just bought some colored pens because
Excellent.
I bought the Ink and Volt. My problem is I haven't used it yet. I've started writing in it and I've started but like the problem for me is when do I do that? Like I need to figure out when to do it and how detailed to get and tell me about how detailed you get on the day. Like on each day, what do you like what are some tips? That's what I need to know. What are some tips? Because let me give you an example of my practice session. So say I sit
Okay.
down to play
Hmm.
something and then I think of something I wanted to remember. So I pick up my phone and I put it in a note. while I'm
Hmm.
practicing, which is bad because I shouldn't be doing anything else, but I don't want to forget it, right? And then there's a notification, like
Hmm.
there's a text or there's an email or something, or Instagram was already open
Yes.
on my phone when I open it,
Yes.
right?
Right. Okay, so here's the thing. I have discovered, I'm sure I'm the last person in the world to discover this, but I have discovered that practicing is like meditation for me in terms of it being a portal for all of my best ideas.
Yes.
Right? I could be totally in the zone practicing, completely focused on what I'm doing, and yet this brilliant idea will pop into my head,
Yeah.
and it's almost like being in a deep state of meditation,
For me too.
right?
It's practicing
For
and it's
repetitive.
also when I'm in the shower. It's like when you're
Okay.
doing I don't know why,
Yeah.
but
No,
when you're
I think
doing
that's common.
it's like when you're doing something that you're using your brain, but it's like your right brain can take a break, or there's something going on there. I don't know. You're right. It's a little bit
Right.
like meditation.
So
So
I'm aware when I sit down to practice, I'm fully aware of the fact that that's when my ideas are going to come to me. So I have a pad of paper,
okay,
like just a small notepad on the table next to where I practice. So and with a pencil or a pen or something, and I just jot the ideas down because I know the second I pick up my phone, I'm
it's over.
scrolling Instagram for 5 minutes, and I'm like, oh right, Beethoven. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
um, so yeah, no, that the struggle is real there, but um, in both ways, write the idea down, don't lose it, but don't pick up your phone.
Right. And then do
Um,
you have strict rules? Like I've been thinking I need to start making rules for myself, like I am not allowed to answer any emails while I'm doing this thing. Like for the next 45 minutes that say I'm at my computer and I sat down with the intention to do something. But
mhm.
then an email comes in and then I answer that. And then and then I turn on Facebook because I need to post something. And there's a Facebook message and that person wants something. And then I know that I do it because what if I don't do it right now, I'll forget. Like I feel like I get into that phase where like if I don't do this right now, I'm going to forget to do
Right.
it later, so I'll just do it now. I'll just reply to this person right now so I don't wait forever. And like all of a sudden an hour went by and I'm like, okay, I did one tiny little thing on a million
Hmm.
things and I got nothing done. So how do you
Right.
handle that?
Um, I try to be a little easy on myself these days. I used to be super strict and disciplined about everything, and I think I'm deciding that maybe it's living on an island. I don't know. But if I have a really tight deadline and I need to get something finished, or if I've been avoiding something, like if I have a blog post and I'm just like dragging my feet on getting it
Yeah.
published, then I will say, okay, no social media, no opening any tabs, nothing. Like just finish this and then you can work.
Okay.
Um, but I think it's like practicing. I mean, we're all artistic, creative people. We have different kinds of days. There are days when I am just in the mood to just drill things over and over and shred and just get that kind of work done.
Mhm.
And sometimes I'm in the mood to just kind of play through things. I don't know. It depends on how tired I am, how focused I am. And the same thing goes for my work style, I think. Some days I just let myself be all over the place, and other days I try to be more disciplined.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, you have to know yourself if that's a problem that you keep getting really distracted, then I think if you cut yourself off from it for a couple of weeks, you'll get out of that habit.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I love that idea. Like, don't be so strict that you're like, I can never, but like it's almost like a detox. Like, okay, it's
Yeah.
time to be super strict on certain things. Because one thing I did break through is my days. Like, I finally have designated like I try to never have a recording on a Monday or a Friday because
Hmm.
so I know that around that weekend, coming out of the weekend, usually there's a lot of stuff I need to catch up on that I couldn't get to on the weekend, and a call or a recording cuts into
Right.
that. So it's better
Right.
to have it on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And then like Friday, typically that feels like it's sort of a throwaway day, you know.
Right.
just
Oh,
because
for me
of,
too.
yeah. And so it's a good day to catch up on things you didn't get to during the week. So at least I've been, once I got consistent with what I'm doing on days, that has taken away so much anxiety. Because, like, before, if everything was willy nilly, things could happen whenever. There was a lot of anxiety of, like, am I forgetting something? Did I forget to do,
Right.
you know?
Right.
So
Absolutely.
that has really helped me. But I think I need to take your advice and get super serious. Like, do you do that Pomodoro method? Have you heard of that before?
No. I mean, yes, I've heard of it, but no, I don't do that. I mean,
Yeah.
I
I,
suppose I do in my own way. I might just say, okay, just, just Kate, just work on this for 20 minutes or just
right.
work on this for 15 minutes and then go do something else.
Isn't it
Um,
the blog? Tell me about the blog. What's your blog about?
oh, it's called Tales from the Lane. It's it's kind of morphed a little bit. I started it when I moved to Bermuda. I was just kind of bored and didn't have that much to do, and
Hmm.
it's kind of gotten more musician focused. Um, so it's kind of a lifestyle blog for musicians who are, beginning their professional career, want some advice on best ways to travel, or anybody who's doing it really.
Hmm.
So travel resources and teaching ideas and um, just, you know, little things here and there.
That's cool.
It's a lot of fun.
What have you learned about yourself from blogging?
What have I learned about myself from blogging? I've been surprised that people keep coming up to me and saying that they really like my writing. And I mean, I'm fairly dyslexic and always felt like I struggled with that. And so people are coming up and they're like, "Oh no, we really like your voice. We really love your writing. We love reading your articles." Like, oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
you know what? Your post about, I have to bring it up here and I'll definitely link it in the show notes, but your post about when you're in a funk was such a great post.
oh, I'm so glad you like that one. Yeah, I think it's something that we all go through, and I think that was the main reason for starting the blog and writing was that I feel like there are so many unspoken things in the classical music world
Mm,
that we're raised to be kind of competitive,
yeah.
and of course we're supposed to be competitive with ourselves only, but it ends up you get a little protective. You don't want to give away your secrets, and
Hmm.
I just think that's kind of nonsense. There is room for all of us. It's not like you can only have a certain number of soloists or a certain number of chamber music groups or
Right.
what have you. Um, and so I think I wanted to start it to open up that dialogue of, hey, this is something that a lot of us have gone through, and these are some things that might help you get out of it, or this is a good way to think about auditions. This is something that helped me, and just to get that conversation going. And I'm surprised at which posts have gone completely viral, and that's kind of steered me towards what are the conversations that people are wanting to have.
Right. I know, I've noticed the same thing on Crushing Classical. Like, you put
Yeah.
something out and suddenly you're like, whoa, this one got traction. Like, people want to talk about this.
Yeah.
And
And it's usually the things that, if I'm feeling frustrated about something and I
yeah.
write a blog post about it and everybody's like, me too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very exciting. But
Yeah. What's
yeah.
it like to live in Bermuda?
Oh my God, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Are
I
there
mean,
other.
seriously, pink sand, turquoise water. It's
Mm,
really nice. And it's great for me right now because there's no classical music scene. I
yeah,
mean,
that's what I was going to ask you. Like,
there's a
what's.
wonderful school of music that does a Suzuki strings program primarily, and also they teach voice and guitar and piano. It's like your just standard after school and weekend community music
Mm-hmm.
school, and I teach there. But I mean, I remember when I first moved here, and somebody said, "Oh, you'll love it here. We have a huge classical music scene here. We have a Gilbert and Sullivan Society." And that was it, full stop. That was, I was like, okay. I said, that's nice. That sounds fun. I don't know if I'd call that a thriving classical music scene, but it's great because I have a tendency to say yes too often. And so I would just say yes to every concert and gig that came up. And uh, it's nice not being busy when I come home.
Yeah.
So when I'm home, I have my routine, I practice, I work. I get to hang out with my husband. He's a big sailor, so we have a boat. It's awesome to be out on the water here.
So
And
why does he live in Bermuda? I mean, why was he living there in the first place?
he's a high school physics teacher. He just
Okay.
got a job there. Yeah. He
Oh,
was
wow.
living in England and he wanted to get out of England. And I mean, he's had sort of a roundabout career in many ways, but he kind of started out in Bermuda and landed back in Bermuda 10 years later. And he loves the weather. He loves sailing, and this is a
Mm.
huge sailing community. So he's happy here. I'm happy here. There you
Sounds
go.
great.
We'll stay as long as they let us.
It sounds great. So when you first moved there, did you know about the music school or did you just apply once you got there?
Uh, I didn't know about it per se, but I had been dating Paul for about 6 months, and I was in Chicago where I grew up, and ran into a mutual friend, and she said, "Oh, you're going back and forth to Bermuda. Do you see Jenny?" I'm like, who? She said Jenny Sheridan, and she was another violinist that we had grown up with in Chicago, who apparently was living and teaching in Bermuda with her husband and kids. And it turns out that she lives down the street from where Paul was living, and we had just kind of lost touch after high school. So it was great to connect with her and great to be able to, we would do a chamber music concert once a year, and that was really fun. But yeah, she was teaching at the School of Music with her husband, and they introduced me to that. And she was actually teaching cello there
As a violinist.
as a violinist. Yeah,
So
there
she
were a
was
couple
probably
of cello
like,
teachers.
she was
There were a
probably
couple
glad
of
you were there.
Yeah, she was better. I mean, there were a couple of cello teachers here who were great, but there certainly weren't enough to go around for all of the kids who wanted to take cello lessons. So um, after I moved here, uh, they had an opening on the faculty, and they contacted me and asked if I would step in part time. So I teach here on primarily Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, and then I travel Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, fly back on Monday. Of course, that's not every week, but it helps to kind of shape my schedule that way.
Yeah. So do you fly through Miami to go to Bermuda?
You can fly through Boston, New York, Philadelphia, DC, Miami.
Oh, it
It's
just goes direct from those cities to Bermuda.
direct from those cities. Yeah, Toronto has a direct flight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, when I go back, I still go to Boston quite a bit. I have a condo there still. Uh, and that's a 97-minute flight.
That's
So,
that's not
yeah,
long. Wow.
no, it's not long at all. I mean, so if I'm going back and forth to Boston or New York, it's very easy. But for instance, I got back from Houston yesterday, and for being gone for 4.5 to 5 days, it took 7 flights.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, 7 flights to get to
Seven
Houston.
flights just one way?
No, no, no,
No,
no, round trip.
I'll take like
Round trip.
what?
Yeah, no, no, yeah.
But
Well,
still,
that's
that's a
called a
lot.
bus, but yeah, no, it was a lot. It was a lot of plane tickets. I mean, a lot of flights for a short amount of time, but I'll get the miles. It's all worth it.
Exactly. That's a good point. So do you try to fly the same? Because that would be good advice for people who want to travel. How do you manage?
Definitely.
Do you use the same airline every time?
Yeah, I try to use Delta and American. They're both really great with dealing with my cello,
Oh,
and
great.
and they tend to fly the routes and have hubs in the cities that I'm going to most often.
Do you
And
have to buy two tickets?
sometimes I do. And what's great, what I've discovered is that you don't have to pay the taxes on the cello. So something that I think a lot of cellists don't know.
Oh,
So you don't have to buy two full price tickets. You buy yours, and you have to call the airline and do it. You can't do it online.
okay.
Um, and they take the taxes off. So it's usually between $100 and $200 less than the published price on the ticket, depending on where you're going. Uh,
Wow.
so it ends up being like 1.5 tickets that you're buying. And if I can afford it, I do that. If I'm going somewhere and I need my cello with me, but I'm not necessarily going for concerts, I do have a Stevenson case, which is made by Alan Stevenson in England, and they were sort of made to go with the oversized bags and the dogs and
Oh,
So there's
really?
still, yeah, I mean, it's still gate checked and it's walked on and off the plane. It's a little bit more protected, but knock on wood, 26 years I've had that case and never had a single issue. So that was a great investment.
Yeah,
My parent,
that's
my parents bought that for me when I was 16 and having to, when you're going to music school, you have to go to the schools to have a lesson with the teacher first, and then you go back again to have your audition later in the year. And my parents weren't going to send me by myself, so that was, two people and a cello going to each school twice
right.
in a year. So they invested in that case, which has obviously more than paid for itself 27 years later.
So, what did your parents and like teachers and stuff, those type of people in your life, what did they say when you said you weren't gonna freelance or audition for orchestras anymore?
Uh, I mean, my
I mean, you do freelance, but
yeah.
like how you're gonna focus your career on soloing. Were they like, okay, were they nervous about financial?
No, I think I've always had a bit of entrepreneurial spirit in me. I mean, I remember
Uh-huh.
there was one summer I wasn't doing anything, and so I was like 10 or 11, and so I made up this flyer and gave it to all of my neighbors who had little kids that I was going to host like a story time and a snack time in my backyard. And so, like, for 1 hour a day, they would send their kids and they'd pay me. Um,
Nice.
yeah, I mean, it was, the most innocent, silly little thing. But
But
yeah, I've
you
always
had
sort
the
of found
wherewithal
a way
to,
to,
yeah.
yeah, I was like, all right, I need money. What are my skills? What can I do? Okay, done. You just have to figure it out.
Yeah.
The person I was most worried about, it was a slightly different pivot in my career was, yeah, I was at the New World Symphony for
Mm-hmm.
3 years and kind of got there by mistake. It's a long story, but there I ended up after undergrad. It's an orchestral training academy. It's like La La Land. They give you everything. It was this magical 3 years in my life and I loved it. But I realized at a certain point that, well, first of all, I like didn't take any orchestra auditions while I was there, which is kind of the point. I realized I liked playing the orchestra concerts, but that wasn't when I was happiest. I was happiest when I was doing the chamber music concerts, and we had opportunities to do some solo stuff. We worked with Janet Bookspan on public speaking. I loved that. And it was all those other things. It was they would bring great cellists in to work with us, and um, after 3 years, MTT can offer you a fourth year, and he did generously offer me that fourth year. And I told him that I didn't want it, and that I, you know, didn't want an orchestra job. Here I'm telling this man who is like arranged to have me get this incredible training for 3 years to get an orchestra job, and I had taken the spot from somebody who maybe really did want an orchestra job, and here I was saying thanks, but no thanks, and I was terrified of his reaction.
Mm.
I kept trying to like ask his assistant, like, can you just tell him, no, you need to go to a studio and have this conversation with him. And he could not have been more supportive.
Wow.
He was amazing. He was wonderful. He was like, no, go do what makes you happy. And, um, let me know if you need anything. So he wrote me a lovely letter that opened a lot of doors for me, and just sort of hand it to people and they'd say, okay. Um, So yeah, in my experience, I've always been scared of what people will say. I think that's sort of ego driven, right?
Yeah.
Like you think they're going to say, "Oh, you think you're good enough to do this," right? That's a
Yeah.
real fear. Um, and they never do. They
Mm.
never do. Everybody's been really supportive, and I don't think it's because they all thought I was some superstar hotshot cellist. I think they just, people want to support each other more than we want to believe.
Right. Right. You probably had the fear that you were disappointing him because you thought that he wanted you to do something else. That it was all projected on him.
Right,
Like you
right,
thought he expected something, and that's
right,
great. That's really
right.
great. And
Um,
I totally get that fear though. I think every classical musician has that.
yes,
You know.
we do. We all need years of therapy, but
It's true. So what would you say what's your biggest piece of advice for somebody who wants to create a career like yours? Either whether or not they're, I mean, maybe there's two sets of advice because I'm thinking like thinking of a musician who's still in school considering that they would like to have more chamber music and soloing in their career, or even
Mhm.
somebody who is a freelancer or even has a job. What would you say to them?
Somebody in school, I would say be open to all sorts of opportunities. Be open to the fact that you don't have to choose one thing anymore. You don't have to just be a teacher or just be a soloist or just have an orchestra job,
Mm-hmm.
but to figure out what are the things where you feel most yourself, your most authentic self, um, and then soak up every opportunity you can. Right? If you're in Boston, if you're at the New England Conservatory, and your dream is to be a cellist in a great orchestra, well then go down the street and knock on the doors of all of the cellists in the Boston Symphony and see if you can play for them and work for them or hear them play. Just work on excerpts and take every class you can and tell the orchestra manager that you want to play in every concert you possibly can and just do it. And the same with chamber music or solo stuff. Just really get as much out of it as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And for somebody who is already mid-career and questioning whether they're doing the right thing, I would just say figure out what you want and do it. It's really there's room here for all of us to do exactly what we want to be doing, and at every level. At every level.
Yes.
If you're like, you know what, I love freelancing, but I do miss playing solo repertoire, but I don't really want to be a soloist, but I miss being able to play the Bach suite or a Beethoven sonata once in a while. There are tons of places where you can go and play those things, and it's there's less pressure, um, and you can go do it and feed your soul that way. Or if you do want a huge career shift, just do it. Just do it. Figure out what you need to make that happen and start doing it.
Yeah. It's just like Nike, just do it.
Just do it. Well, I
um,
have to say that was one thing I really loved about the Ink and Volt, about that planner, was
mm,
that it helped kind of shape, because you look at it helps you look at your big picture goals, like what do you want to accomplish this year, and then break it down into the months, and then break that down into the week, and then break
okay.
that down into the day. So I was able to kind of, with these big projects way back, when it's like, okay, create a CD. Like, that's huge. I had no idea what I was doing. Build a website. That's huge. I had no
Mm-hmm.
idea what I was doing. But I could say, Monday, pick pick your theme on WordPress,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Or
just one step.
even if it was Monday, look at 25 different themes on WordPress, and Tuesday was pick a theme.
Right.
If you just break it down into little steps every single day, knock a couple of them off the list, and it'll eventually get done.
That's great advice. And I was just thinking about how what you're saying, like just pick something that you want to try and do it. A big thing that I finally recognized I was doing to myself was telling myself if I was going to try something, that didn't mean that I was no longer doing the other thing. Like, kind of,
Yes.
like you're
Yeah.
not saying, I'm not playing in orchestras anymore because
Right.
I have a podcast. No, like,
Right.
that's not true. You can do both, and you don't have to define. I think growing up, I was like, I want a job until I have a job. That's, I'm not doing the real thing that I'm supposed to be doing. And like, that's so singular, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I really needed
Yeah.
to realize that I kept doing that to myself about everything.
Right.
And you can be a multifaceted, and that's what makes you unique and not in actually in competition with other people because you have different aspects of yourself that are different from other people. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And you bring something great to every part of that. And I think we get into the habit of thinking that all of the people who are doing what we want to do, that they had the same trajectory, right?
Right.
They had the same path to get there. And if you look at it, no, they all had a completely different way of getting there. They all have different stories, and we do too. And what I think is great about the classical music world today is that there is room for people to do multiple things. You can be a chamber musician and a podcaster and a blogger and a
Mm-hmm.
speaker and a concert promoter, and you can do all those things.
Exactly. I love that. So tell me, what advice would you give to somebody who really wants to get better at organizing? What's the first step to creating a system that works for them?
Okay, I think it's good to look big picture. I mean, I think I showed you my year on the wall one
Yes.
day, right? So I have the giant month by month calendar. I got mine at Paper Source, and I got this idea from Steph Crowder. I have to give her credit. She has the Courage and Clarity podcast. It's just a standard business podcast that
Okay.
I really like. But she did this thing, and I just ripped off every page for 2019 and put them on one wall of my office/studio, and have color coded post-its for concerts versus travel versus again, youth orchestra and teaching stuff. And you can see the big picture. You see the whole year ahead of you, and you see where you have big spaces. Like if you're thinking about taking on a project, you could put it in a month that has fewer post-it notes in. But it also, like for the youth orchestra, I was able to take all of the important dates throughout the entire season and put them on that calendar so that I'm not double booking things later, right? If you're teaching, could be the first week of lessons in September, but you should figure out, look at the schedule and figure out when your spring recital is going to be for your students and put it in the calendar, because you don't want to be out of town concertizing the 2 weeks before your students have to play a big recital.
Right.
And just, that's the first step of just seeing your whole year
The
at a
big
glance, the big picture of where are the sort of the immovable things, where the things that are set in stone, and get those in place. And then you can kind of shape things and just get more and more detailed as you go. What needs to happen this month? What needs to happen this week in order for those monthly goals to be met? And, things happen. You get sick, or a spouse or a kid gets sick. Anything. Things happen, and it kind of skews your. One little trick that I have is that I try not to schedule things on Fridays. Like in terms of work, when I'm figuring out what admin work I have to do for the week, I try to schedule it Monday through Thursday. First of all, because nobody wants to get an email sitting at their desk on Friday afternoon asking them about starting a big project.
Right.
Right. Nobody wants to get an email saying, would you consider me to play on your series? They're going to be like, I want to consider happy hour in 2 hours. I want to,
Exactly.
I want to get to my weekend. And by the time Monday comes around, they're going to forget it. You're going to be buried in their third page of emails. So it's not the best way to reach out to people anyway. I use Fridays to kind of tie up loose ends, send out some thank yous to people. And that way, if things have happened earlier in the week, if I had a day where I just had, like, sometimes I get migraines. If I had a killer migraine that day and really couldn't get much done on Tuesday, well, at least I have Friday to catch up with some of that work.
Yeah.
So I don't get too far behind. But scheduling a little bit of time each day, if you do have some admin work in your life that needs to get done, scheduling a little bit each day, scheduling some time that's dedicated to that, I have found is really helpful.
That is such great advice. I love the big picture idea, because so many times I've scheduled something and then realized, oh my gosh, like the next day I have this big thing or this big gig or something. Like I wasn't considering the week before or the week after. I do that a lot with going out of town. Like, oh, we shouldn't have gone out of town because as soon as we get back, we have this big concert or whatever,
Right.
So, yeah.
No, it's so helpful. It's, I think my brain is such a disorganized mess to begin with that I have to be super organized or nothing would get done.
That makes sense.
So it's out of sheer necessity that I have all this stuff. People laugh at me. My husband is very messy, but never forgets anything. And he just looks at my calendars and laughs because he doesn't need them.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm not like that. If it's not on the calendar, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. I suppose he missed my birthday, but other than that, it's fine. It's okay. But
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kate. This was such a great conversation. I feel like I'm going to listen to it again and then start incorporating all these things, and I need to dig into my
Oh,
ink and
good.
Volt.
Yes, you'll love it. You'll love it. Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you so much for
So
having me.
great.
It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you.